In this lecture, we'll be addressing pain and the pain theories associated with this. You want to have your outline notes next to you so that you can follow along and try to fill the outline out as best as you can. So we'll start first with the definition of pain. Pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage. Pain involves sensory, motor, and emotional components that are influenced by culture and social factors as well as past experience. So if we look at that statement, we begin to see that different cultures might respond to painful experiences in different ways. Social factors can play a part in that. We talk about the hero in sports and athletics is trained to forget or ignore their pain so that they can continue to play. Or, as you've probably read in the book The Gift of Pain, Jake, when he was in war, didn't really think about the pain associated with the injury to his leg, but the pain associated with the injection when he was in the hospital, just sitting there by himself, became overwhelming. The next bullet point says this helps explain why everyone perceives pain differently. And pain is whatever the person experiencing it says that it is. So some people will maybe over exaggerate pain in comparison to what maybe you would experience, and some people maybe suppress that and say that it isn't as bad as what may be that you would interpret it as. Again, some components of pain A is sensory, so what is physiologically taking place and what is felt, and we're going to talk about that today with the theories of pain, primarily the sensory. And then B is affective, or the motivational piece. It's the emotional impact that pain has on an individual. Pain can have a memory of sorts, so if you drop a 10-pound weight on your toe a month ago and you drop a 10-pound weight and it's close to your foot, you'll flinch and even experience some of the pain associated with the first experience that you had. So pain has kind of like a memory of sorts. It can be ignored in order to accomplish something great or more important. You've heard stories probably of people that have lifted cars, or they're in foxholes and ignore pain to the extent of saving someone else. Pain can be a gift, but it can also be chronic enough to lead to depression, anxiety, and decreased quality of life. This next slide just was on the announcements, and I apologize for not being able to be at lecture on Tuesday. So we'll go through the half of the lecture via these slides, and then on Thursday we'll pick up the other half. So this is just some fairly graphic pictures. These people all have leprosy, which is the disease that you're reading about in The Gift of Pain, and have been affected either by burns or so you can see in the far upper right hand corner somebody with their hands out, and these fingers have been actually eaten off by rats. They weren't able to perceive the pain associated with that experience. So I think we'll probably just move on here. Let's go down to, well, on your notes it says, I just reiterated a reminder that you can find in your book, just to talk about, as we get into the physiology of pain, kind of a mnemonic that afferent pain arrives in the dorsal horn, and we're going to be talking about that. You can see in this picture the red is the afferent pain message, and it comes into the dorsal horn. And the efferent pain, which we're going to talk about, and that's kind of depicted by the blue arrow in this picture, exits from the ventral horn, and we don't have it going on any further from here, but this blue arrow would extend then out the ventral horn. So Adam and Eve is what the book recommends. Afferent arrives in the dorsal horn, and efferent exits in the ventral horn. Just a mnemonic to help you remember that. Pages 139 and 145 in your book give background definitions to any structures that you might be unfamiliar with, so please reference these if you don't understand a particular term. Moving on to neuroanatomy. Here's a picture of some nociceptors, or different receptors, excuse me, that are found in the body. They're specialized nerve endings that respond to different inputs: vision, hearing, smell, taste, touch, the free nerve endings. But there's a specific receptor then that actually responds to pain. So we call these nociceptors. So there are receptors that are found. So number one, I guess, on your outline is receptors, and they're attached to a sensory nerve. And then within that we have three divisions. A is superficial or cutaneous receptors. And number one would be mechanoreceptors. And number two is thermoreceptors. All right. So they're able to perceive temperature changes. And number three is nociceptors, and these are our pain receptors, the free nerve endings that are pictured in this slide. They're stimulated by stress, whether it's mechanical, thermal, electrical, or chemical, such as bradykinins. The receptors are more sensitive after an injury because they've been affected by chemical mediators. B is deep or somatic, so these are receptors that are found in muscles, ligaments, joints, or organs. We have two categories here. Number one is called the proprioceptor, and it's stimulated by potentially damaging mechanical, chemical, or thermal stress. And then the second one, again, is nociceptors, and those, again, are pain receptors. And then the last one, C, is visceral, and those are just the general term that we use for receptors in the organs. We're going to primarily talk about nociceptors in this lecture because we're addressing pain and the pathway of pain. Once the pain signal is received or picked up by these receptors, then these receptors transmit a signal, and that's typically an electrochemical impulse. And it goes first, then the signal will transfer to the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. So that's where we're going to go to first. So if we look at this slide here, we see down at the bottom there's an injury that's been inflicted, and we have the nociceptors are sending this message up through, it's a peripheral nerve, to the dorsal root ganglion, and then in the dorsal horn it's going to synapse. So this nerve fiber that transmits the message from the receptor to the dorsal horn of the spinal cord is called your first order afferent nerve. The cell body lays in the dorsal root ganglion, and the synapse, again, is in the dorsal horn. If we look at this picture, we can see that the dorsal horn is in a cartoon-like drawing. It sits in the back, and we have the afferent messages coming in. Efferents going back out to the body will come out to the ventral horn. So the dorsal horn is a posterior portion of gray matter of the spinal column, and then the ventral horn is the anterior portion. There's two types of nerves. This is on your outline. The first one is myelinated, and these types of nerves are fast conducting. See if I think this slide kind of shows it. We've got these large, like the A alphas, and the A betas can be seen on this slide. These are myelinated nerves. They're fast conducting. The A betas will pick up messages from your skin and touch and vibrations, and they're easily stimulated, and the message is sent quickly. The A deltas are smaller. They pick up messages from the skin and pressure as well as pain. So these would be considered nociceptors, the A deltas would. Clear over to the left, you see a small green fiber called the C fibers. These are unmyelinated fibers, and they're slower conducting. They're pain conducting fibers. They require greater stimulation in order to elicit a response. And it's typically activated by heat or mechanical or chemical message. So as we review, we've got 3 myelinated in this picture. We've got 1 unmyelinated. Again, they're first order afferent nerves. They're coming into the dorsal horn right here. Here's a picture of a myelinated axon. You can see that they're much faster in conducting a message because the message doesn't stay along the axon, and it conducts by jumping from one node of Ranvier to the next, so that the nerve impulse or the message goes much faster than an unmyelinated nerve. All right, back to our schematic, and we're going to talk about the second nerve here, which starts at the dorsal horn, and it's going to go all the way up through the spinal cord to a structure in the brain called the thalamus. So on your notes, you can see it says second order afferent, sometimes referred to as T cells, but they transmit information in the spinal cord to the thalamus, is the blank. The cell body in the second order neuron is in the dorsal horn, but it actually crosses over and exits the ventral horn, and then the cell axon ascends up through the spinal cord. So as this nerve ascends, it's actually not in the gray matter. It becomes the white matter of the spinal cord, and that's what the white matter is made up of, is all these ascending pathways that are going up to your brain. If we take a cross-section look of the spinal cord and we focus on these ascending nerve tracts, we can see that they're highly organized. We'll have particular messages even sent. So if we look at the, this should be lateral spinal thalamic tract, this area here actually contains the pain messages that are ascending up into your brain. So the posterior spinal cerebral tract is sending different messages than the anterior spinal cerebral tract. So every one of these little areas that's shaded in is sending a particular message up into the brain. Very highly organized. And this is a picture of where our second order afferents are going to end. And this is areas up in the thalamus. This is the cell body, or this is where the cell bodies of this order are. They're going to synapse with the third order. So I'm going to move on to the next slide and get a close-up here of the thalamus. And again, it's highly organized. There's a couple areas that I want to highlight. One is what's called the VPL, and this is the ventral posterolateral section. And this area, messages of pain from the body will synapse here. And then right next to it is the VPM, the ventral posteromedial section, and pain messages from the head and face will synapse here. So you can see that certainly we have more sensory nerves taking up a percentage, a large area in the thalamus. The thalamus, when the nerve message gets here, it provides input to the limbic system. So the limbic system kind of brings in our experiences, or our kind of the affective part of pain. So whether it be pain memory, experiences that happened, how we responded, emotional responses to pain, this is where that starts to be incorporated. We could go on from here then and talk about third order afferents, which is the pain message then relayed from the thalamus to the cerebral cortex. The exact location and intensity of the pain have been determined by this time. And then the brain interprets this, and then a message could be sent back down, resulting in an efferent effect, which might be take your hand off the hot stove, or move your foot, grab your foot, hold it. It might include messages that maybe make you feel nauseated or feel like you're going to vomit, and those would be the input from the affective experience of pain. All right, the next thing that we're just going to touch on is drugs and pain. And just a reminder that some drugs will block pain, and they do this by filling the pain receptor site so that nothing else can attach to that pain receptor site, and therefore then the pain is inhibited. So if we're talking about a drug that is doing this, then it's going to be released or effective in this region, and then the pain message cannot get across because the neurotransmitters cannot be picked up in this second order afferent nerve, because the receptor sites where the message should be picked up have already been filled by the medication. So such as morphine might fill that up. So some drugs can reverse it and then bond to the pain blockers and change its shape so that it can't fit into the pain receptor site. So they can be blocked from actually getting into the receptor site, or it can change the message of the shape of the neurotransmitter. So a couple ways that pain can be blocked by drugs. We're going to move into talking about some specific opioids, endogenous opioids, which are naturally occurring substances that decrease pain within your body. They've been recorded to be 1,000 times stronger than morphine. I'm not sure of how they can be harvested, or how long that could be experienced, but that's what's recorded in the book. So on your outline here, the first section we're going to talk about things that inhibit postsynaptic nerve transmission. So if we inhibit that postsynaptic nerve transmission, we would be decreasing pain. So the first category there is enkephalins, and these are endogenous opiates that are found in the body. This term is derived from the Greek for in the head. It's a mixture of two peptides. They're similar in shape and have similar analgesic properties as morphine. They're found in the brain, the spinal cord, and the gut. They have a half-life of only a few seconds, and so they'll operate at the spinal cord level, not in circulation of our bodies. They're thought to block the gate by interfering with the A delta fibers and the C fiber signal transmitted to the T cells. And then they're released through a non-painful sensory stimulus. So enkephalins in our body can be released through sensory tens, gentle massage, and we'll talk about this in more depth when we talk about the pain theories. Endorphins are a little bit different. They're produced in the pituitary gland and they're circulated throughout the body. They have a half-life that's a little longer, so we're at 4 hours. An example of these would be a beta endorphin. It acts in several areas of the central nervous system, including the dorsal horn, and we've talked about that area. They inhibit pain signal transmission and decreases chemical irritants in the central nervous system. Can be released through modalities such as acupuncture, neuroprobe, noxious 10, and intense exercise. So these are all at a higher level intensity and may even actually involve pain. So we have a painful stimulus causing the release of a pain-reducing opioid. Some people can have less endorphins and less enkephalins in their body, so that can vary, which may affect the amount of pain that's perceived. Picture of a couple, another endogenous opioid, and this is serotonin, and it works to decrease pain signals from the brain to the spinal cord. Just a picture of how the chemicals of serotonin is released and then taken up in the receptors, again to decrease pain. So the second blank that I have on your notes there should be dopamine. I don't have a slide really to go with that, but it affects brain processes that control movement, emotional response, and the ability to experience pleasure and pain. So that's dopamine, D-O-P-A-M-I-N-E. If we look at the slide again, just a review on enkephalins and endorphins, there's much speculation that perhaps people that are especially sensitive to pain have a deficiency of these opioids. And then a placebo effect also may be able to increase enkephalin and endorphins. So there's some interesting studies continuing on that. moving on.